Good evening, everybody. It's 7 p.m. on 22nd of July 2020, and this is the Cabinet meeting for this evening. As we are still coming out of the COVID-19 lockdown process, the meeting is still being held as a hybrid. With tonight, Roger Harris will be joining us via the internet. And can confirm there is full cabinet attendance in the chamber, as well as Chief Exec and the Monitoring Officer. This is being streamed live out to our residents, and just to remind you that the microphones are quite sensitive and pick up everything you say, but you need to have your red light on so everyone can hear it in the wider audience. And as soon as you speak, the camera will focus on you. So with that, I'm going to move to item 1, which is apologies for absence. They also have got full attendance in the chamber, so there's no apologies for absence. Moving on to item 2, the minutes, which are found between page 5 and 12. This is to approve the correct record of the minutes. The Cabinet held on 17th of June 2020. Is that agreed, or are there any comments? Agreed. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 3, which is items of urgent business. I've received no requests for an item of urgent business this evening. Item 4, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest for any member here in relation to the matters on the agenda? No? Excellent. Move on to item 5, statements from the leader. I really am pleased to announce that we've had independent verification that Thurrock's public realm is cleaner than it's ever been before. The team from Keep It Tidy found that all areas of the borough, including parks, towns, streets, are cleaner and clearer than ever, with inspectors finding only 3.67% of sites they visited in the borough had litter on them, meaning over 96% did not. We've all been able to see the evidence with our own eyes. It's obvious that litter, graffiti, dog fouling, fly posting and fly tipping are down, but this is something we would expect during the COVID crisis. But it's proper independent verification that this council is doing more than it's ever done to keep our streets tidy. I did ask the director earlier this week to find out if all those that also received their scores around at the same time, if they all saw a reduction. And while some of them did see a reduction, not as much as ours. So it's not solely down to people staying at home and staying safe, which is really good. But to break it down, Keep It Tidy inspectors found 96.33% of the sites they visited in the borough had better than acceptable litter level against a target of 91%. And that's much better than the 93.5% we had this time last year. 94% had better than acceptable levels of graffiti, 99% had better than acceptable levels of fly posters, 98.67% had better than acceptable levels of fly tipping, and 99.67% had better than acceptable levels of dog fouling. We all know that there are still areas in the borough that need more attention, and we are working hard to clear them up and make sure that when it comes around to next inspection that we keep and maintain these fantastic scores. And I would like to thank every single one of our hard-working street cleansing teams that has been out through the crisis, keeping our streets clean and making best use of such a terrible time to improve the general feel and look of Thurrock and keep our parks and public spaces open for those that are using it at the time for exercise, and will continue to do so. I'm also going to thank our residents for their participation. When I would go for my daily walk, the number of times I'd see people coming off the field with bags of rubbish, of their own rubbish to take home, rather than just leaving it in the bin. So a big thank you to all those that have taken part there with that as well. Since the last cabinet, we've seen great strides on our journey to the new normal. Pubs, bars and restaurants, hairdressers and other businesses in the borough have reopened. The National Test and Trace scheme has been launched, and we play a key role in keeping the rate of infections down as the economy begins to recover. Thurrock Council has enrolled in this locally. We've published our outbreak control plan. This plan sets out a local strategy to prevent and control COVID-19 in Thurrock. It is mainly focused on preventing, monitoring and reducing the spread of it, where the contact tracing is required in complex situations and places including care homes, schools, certain workplaces, and for vulnerable residents where there is a local outbreak risk that would require us to follow up. But again, it's still vital for us all to play our role and behave responsibly. But the evidence we've seen so far in Thurrock is much to be proud of. Businesses and residents have risen to the challenge magnificently, and again, doing all they can to play a part, not just locally but nationally, in the fight against this terrible disease. Again, urge all residents to enjoy these new freedoms responsibly, remembering that actions help keep the infection down, continue to socially distance, ideally 2 metres away from each other or 1 metre plus some form of protection, keep washing your hands, and stay alert for the symptoms of a new continuous cough, high temperature, or loss of change to your sense of smell or taste. If you get any of the symptoms, get online or call to the NHS straight away to book a test so they can find out and then log it accordingly. I would also urge our residents not just to stay indoors, but to try and help stimulate our economy by getting out there in a safe way and going and revisiting our shops, get our shops back open, get our local people back to full employment, and start to make that recovery work. But do so safely. Highways England, as we know, have launched the latest round of consultation. I would like to urge all Thurrock residents to make sure their voice is heard on this vital issue. As we know, Thurrock Council unanimously opposed the Highways England proposals, which led to the creation of a major highway through the heart of the borough. And this is the third and probably final part of the consultation in relation to Highways England's re-evaluated plans. My personal view is they don't go far enough to mitigate the harm that will be done to our borough and to our residents. But this is now the time for all residents to have their voice heard in relation to the changes that have been put forward by Highways England. Consultation lasts until the 12th of August, and under the current conditions will happen mostly online. I have asked Highways England to delay the consultation until it could be more accessible to all, but they decided to press ahead despite the difficulties because, quite frankly, they need to move on as well. So I really would urge all residents to go online or with help from family to go online and fill in this consultation. Visit Highways England Lower Thames Crossing Design Refinements consultation and let them know what you think of the plans that are in front of you. It is vital, and we have seen that this consultation, the whole programme has received more comments and more consultation responses than anything else Highways England have ever done. So it really does show again that our residents, as well as residents outside of Thurrock, do want their voice heard. So please do that as soon as you can. Clean it, cut it, fill it since April. We filled 1,347 potholes, every single one of them within the timescales. Cleared 777 tonnes of litter from our streets. Cleared up 388 fly tips, issued 1,163 fixed penalty notes for antisocial behaviour like spitting, littering and dropping cigarette butts, etc. 64 £400 fixed penalty notices have been issued for fly tipping. There have been 58 files been submitted to court for those that have refused to pay the on-spot fines. But as our courts are not fully sitting at the moment, it may be some time before they're heard. But again, we have got, we passed through Cabinet a process where we will quite happily put the pictures of those people that do supply false name and addresses up online, and that will be starting shortly. So if people do think they can get away with giving fake name and address, their pictures will be out there, and at some point we will find out who you are. So with that, are there any other elected members need to make a comment in relation to briefings on policy, budget or other issues? Councillor Watkins.
Thank you very much, Leader. Firstly, I'd just like to echo the Keep Britain Tidy scores as well. I'd like to thank the brilliant job that the team do, and it's great to see that the changes we made last year as part of the constant regeneration of the service have continued to show success. That's really good. I wanted to provide an update on the waste service and some of the upcoming changes. Firstly, I would like to apologise to any resident across the borough who has encountered any difficulty with their bin service over the previous weeks. There have been issues, and today I can announce some further changes to the service which should help bring stability back. But I would also like to say that I would like to thank the residents for being patient with us over this time. But I'd like to personally thank all the crews for their hard work during the peak of the lockdown and their continued hard work throughout obviously the recovery stages post the peak of the lockdown. They're doing an amazing job. And of course, I'd like to thank all staff within the council, all those within the environment department, and as I didn't get a chance at full council, I'd just like to say my thanks as well to all the NHS staff for the sterling job they did over the COVID pandemic. Although life is returning to the new normal for many of us, COVID has not gone away and can cause disruption to service such as the waste service. Over the previous months, the service has gone and continues to go through exceptional demand. It's easier to describe it as Christmas every day. With our service taking unprecedented demand, with overall waste being collected higher than previously, this firstly does put a strain on the service and has done, and that demand has not gone away and isn't going away anytime soon. For a variety of reasons, we have had staff unable to attend work for a number of reasons over the previous weeks, and we have been working within the government guidelines and liaising with the unions to enable staff safe ways of working to allow additional and existing support to increase workforce capacity over this time. But as I reiterate, the virus is still here, and while lockdown measures are gradually brought down, we want to be realistic with the service we can provide successfully with our residents. Over the previous months, we have moved the bin collection for our brown bins. Firstly, it was monthly, then bi-weekly, with collections being any day to the week. As of next Monday, we will remain on a bi-weekly brown bin collection, but on the date of your normal collection. If your bins are collected on a Monday, your brown bin will be collected on a Monday on a 2-week period. Details of when your brown bin will be collected is now online, and you can find it on the website. This is based on feedback we have received from residents around stopping confusion around collections and providing continuity. I hope this helps provide that moving forward. And we have indicated throughout the lockdown, please put food waste into your grey and green bins. I know that that's still not necessarily been followed through by some residents, and obviously that does cause issues sometimes when the bins aren't collected for that 2-week period. So I really do stress that you can put your food waste in your grey or green bins. We will be communicating to residents about this through the use of media, email, local distributions, and I've also asked for a letter to be distributed to each household outlining the changes of this. The service will remain like this until such time that we announce otherwise. And for the future of waste itself, just a brief update, the cross-party working group will be finalising our plans for their suggestions on the future of waste contracts, which will be going to CGS in early October, which will then be brought forward to Cabinet.
Excuse me, thank you, Councillor Watkins. One of the things, as we didn't foresee at the beginning of the pandemic, but one of those things has happened with everyone sat at home, working from home, not being at schools. That extra rubbish is going into our ordinary bins. So our waste crews have to make 2 or 3 trips to East London every journey, every round, to dispose of it. So it really is one of those things no one really thought about right at the front end, but it's having an impact. And the other thing that's having an impact, and I've received a number of complaints in my own ward, is that the bin men are not picking it up because of poor parking. And the residents that are affected by that fully understand it's not our crews and respect that. So it really is about echoing that message again about park responsibly, park well, and think about it's not only you that's going to try and get past in the car. It's going to be one of our large bin lorries, and whilst our bin crews are exceptionally good drivers, there is only so much they can do if there's not enough space. So certainly everyone should start to think a little bit more about where they leave their cars, certainly on bin days. We have had this message out a couple of times through our residents' newsletter, but we'll make sure that obviously that gets out more regularly. And again, we're trying to drive residents to be more self-sufficient and check online, so they know exactly what day their bins will be collected and what bins will be collected that week. With that, I'm going to move on to item 7, which is petitions submitted by members of the public. Lucy, I'm looking at none received. Item 8 is questions from non-exec members. I do have a question from a non-exec member. Unfortunately, he cannot dial in at the moment this evening. So when we get to item 11, I'll read the question out and we will send a written response accordingly, but I'm sure Councillor Howden will be mentioning it anyway in your report. Moving on to item 9, matters referred to Cabinet for consideration by review and scrutiny. We have no specific items in relation to that. I'm sure that will be changing in the coming months. And moving then on to item 10, which is Thurrock Council Home to School Transport and Travel Policy, which can be found on pages 13 to 24, and I shall hand it over to Councillor Jeffreys.
Thank you, Leader. The paper before you is a proposed change to home to school travel transport policy. As the report states, the school travel is primarily the responsibility of parents. However, the council, quite rightly so, has a statutory duty to make home to school travel arrangements free of charge for any child which is eligible. We have a responsibility to publish this policy, and because it's a borough-wide policy, it requires Cabinet approval. So a range of stakeholders were consulted, a full list of which can be found in the report. You can also find a list of questions and responses from the consultation that we held. This report also went to ONS. So the benefits for changing this policy are that the students who travel independently have access to the same opportunities as their peers, improved physical health, a decreased reliance on specialist transport, parent and carers, improved contributions at school, opportunities for students to go out with friends and join clubs, and more opportunities for these students to go to college and to find a job. I'd like to reassure colleagues that these changes will not mean that as of September the 1st, all free transport will stop. Each child will be assessed, and if their disability means that they still need transport, we will still, of course, provide this free of charge. However, I would like to point out that many of these children are in receipt of PIP or mobility allowance or a mobility car, which should be used for getting to school. Before any subsidy is removed, each student will be independently assessed and, if deemed suitable, will be offered a place on our independent travel training course, designed to equip that student with the skills to make their own way to school to benefit from this independence. After considering the responses from stakeholders and taking into account the comments from ONS, I'd like to recommend this report with one change. That is the removal of recommendation 1.1. That can be found on page 14. I've listened to the concerns of ONS and think this would be the right decision. I therefore recommend this report.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffreys. Has any member got any questions in relation to this? Councillor Howden.
Just to welcome the report, I think it's a tremendous pity. Once again, we have seen the Leader of the Opposition be very vocal in the press over the last few days on this issue. Hasn't bothered to attend Cabinet to ask Councillor Jeffreys any questions. And I just hope that when we see coverage of this decision in the press, that due regard is given to an emergency council meeting when the Leader of the Opposition attended 9% of the meetings he was invited to, gives due consideration to his criticisms of this policy when he could have attended Cabinet and asked questions about this policy. Specifically about the SEND transport issue, first of all, it's important to note that, as you say, discretion is still going to be applied to all applications. But from a broad policy perspective, it is a healthy and responsible thing to do to encourage SEND learners to become independently mobile. It is not healthy to try and keep them apart from the mainstream world. And it's something I hope the opposition do support us in. After all, it was the last Labour administration that brought in charging for post-16 transport in 2013. And I don't remember us criticising it then because it was the correct thing to do. And also important to note that regardless of some of their criticisms, we made it quite clear awards that have been issued for families would still be honoured on a means-tested basis. So I think it's a sound policy. I think it's a good policy, and I think that as we go forward, the important thing to remind parents is please apply based on the existing policy, because we do get an awful lot of issues where applications are made within a year based on outdated understanding of the criteria. But I think this is a good approach, and I hope that we see a reasonable response from the opposition, because some of the messages that they're putting out there are very conflicted, very confusing, and it will actually result in young people perhaps not applying for what they're entitled to because they're genuinely confused about the policy based on what the opposition are saying.
Thank you, Councillor Howden. Councillor Coxhill.
I'd just like to point out, obviously, it was really good that ONS worked here, where the cabinet members understood it, what an ONS, people ignoring ONS, bringing executive extraordinary council meetings, and continuously just thinking, some of the opposition used to say we don't listen to ONS. On my account, I can promise I listen to ONS. You've just seen that ONS has made a decision, a change before it gets to cabinet. More eyes seeing these papers, the better. And it's not political point scoring. ONS makes a critical point of getting good things through to cabinet, to get cabinet where we were here. And the more people see it, the more people understand it and give constructive ideas, with the cabinet here will accept them. And I think hopefully the new ONS chairs can move forward knowing that when they write to us, the cabinet member, everyone else will look at their papers before they come to us, and we can make constructive changes. We're not afraid to in public to do this in like Dirty and Laurel in public. And I think this is a good example where better information and better decisions come out of it if ONS does its job properly, and I'm very pleased. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coxhill. Yeah, the whole role of open scrutiny, as we know, is to be the critical friend for cabinet, and one of the things that we insisted that we do right at the beginning of our administration is that our policies would go through open scrutiny for comment and examination. And the fact that we're here tonight, and it's here tonight after recommendations from open scrutiny that families in temporary accommodation for more than 3 months be asked to transfer their children to school with a place that's nearest to the home in which the family has been placed, being removed, is a really good example of that. Indeed, had it not, I would have been raising this as an issue myself. Having had a number of people in the past come to me that have been made homeless for no fault of their own, they then temporary accommodation for 3, 4, 5 months, successful in getting accommodation elsewhere, whether it be private, whether it be council, and then have to move to effectively another school area yet again. You would end up with children possibly at some of the key stages of education, the need for exams or forming up new friendships and so on, missing out because suddenly they're changing schools for the second time in like 3 or 4 months. So again, good ideas, well received, and to move forward. Any other statements or questions in relation to this before we move to the amended recommendations? None? Thank you. So recommendations as outlined on page 14 now are without 1.1. So it just reads 1.2 and 1.3. That being the implementation of charging regime in respect for transport for post-16 pupils aged 16 to 25 with SEND. Pupils will be required to pay for the full costs or make contributions towards the cost of transport. This service is discretionary and the council may charge for the delivery of such transport. At 1.3, which would be obviously the new 1.2, the transport will be delivered in accordance with legislation only when there is no suitable school within a place available within the maximum walking distance from the child's home, 2 miles for pupils under the age of 8 and 3 for pupils over the age of 8. Are they both agreed? Excellent. Thank you for your report, Councillor Jeffries. And now moving to item 11, which is on page 25. Before we go into the report, Councillor Howden, as I say, the new Health Overview Scrutiny Chair has asked a question. Unfortunately, he's having very similar difficulties as I had earlier this week in relation to trying to log on via Teams. His question reads, with the recent media publicity in regards to patients being released back into care homes without being tested, can I ask what procedures and risk assessments have been carried out by Thurrock Council to ensure the safety of returning residents back into care homes? So I'm sure you'll address that as part of your report, and also we will give a written response to Councillor Ralph and indeed every elected member in relation to this. So with that, I pass to Councillor Howden for the report on hospital discharge bridging services as at page 25.
Thank you, Leader. As you say, I'll address Councillor Ralph's question in my general points, but I will write to him separately. I will just say I very much welcome the fact that we're actually having a question from an ONS chairman, which is quite a refreshing change of pace. The report is just a basic request to extend the current arrangement that we've got. I don't typically like contract extensions, but given the very stressed position the care market is in, it's appropriate to extend the current contract while we look to the more permanent relationship. In terms of extending this contract, I think we've got an excellent arrangement at the moment. We saw even at the height of the pandemic, well over 95% of all discharges from hospitals still occurring on time. That's a tremendous achievement. So the extension of that service for the next 6 months is very welcome. We've had a huge amount of work done behind closed doors on the future of the domiciliary care market, the future of the care home market. As I made quite clear in my portfolio speech, we do need to close the gap between what we charge and what we pay, and further details are going to come forward. So I can provide Cabinet that reassurance that that additional work will come. In terms of the discharging arrangements that we're keeping in place, we recommissioned Oak House at the start of lockdown to provide a step up and step down facility. So that means if we have people that we need to discharge from hospital but they're not quite ready to return to a care home, or in an extreme scenario, if we have someone who perhaps needs to exit a care home due to infection issues, we have a facility there at Oak House. We've extended that contract for 12 months. So regardless of what happens over the winter, a possible second spike, that additional resource is going to stay in place. The existing policy, which we've had in place for some time now, is quite clear. No one is discharged from hospital into a Thurrock home without a COVID test beforehand, and keeping Oak House in place is going to help us enable to do that. Those arrangements are working out well, and they're going to be further stress tested when the Local Infection Control Board meets, I believe, later this month after Health and Wellbeing Board. So there will be additional member oversight. And with that, Leader, I'm happy to move recommendations 1.1 and 1.2.
Thank you, Councillor Howden. Any member got any questions in relation to the report? No. Again, just echoing, we're not overly enamoured by having to extend contracts, and we have been trying to work through this administration not to do so, but needs must. So we have recommendations on page 25. That's 1.1, agree the extension of the bridging service until March 2021. Agree the procurement for rapid discharge services and delegate the award of the contract to the Corporate Director of Adults Housing Health in consultation with the relevant portfolio holder. Are both of those agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Excuse me a second. And as I say, Councillor Mays and indeed all elected members will get a copy of the question. Sorry, Councillor Mays, my apologies. Councillor Ralph will get a copy of the question. An answer to the question he's asked, along with a copy sent to all elected members after the meeting. So we now move on to item 12, which is the Great South Regeneration Area Underpass and Public Realm Options Selection. Councillor Cockshaw.
Thank you very much. This item is about one of the most important parts of the Greys regeneration plans for the town centre. However, I must first of all make it open and transparent on the funding of this. There are three options shown on this document tonight, and all three around our cost overruns of the original budget of £27.5 million, £27.4 million. However, this, for example, when we talk about the estimates, these are only estimates. This is not an exact costs of these for these three projects. We'll be looking at bridging this funding gap in numerous ways of reducing the costs, getting the proper estimates, and proper fixed contract prices. We're also looking at finding further funding to bridge the further gaps, which I will talk about just in my speech. But also, the project here today is completely different, really. It's now a larger project. It's got a larger piazza, and the option we're talking about choosing is a much bigger project, different project. And we will there's a once in a lifetime, in fact, I think only 2 lifetimes opportunity to build a major piece of infrastructure and open space in Grays. So once every 50 years or so, this will happen. And I'd like to remind you, though, my colleagues and everyone listening, what is actually happening in the Grays area. So this is only a small part of it, because our Conservative government has committed us to Grays £25 million in high street funding, £25 million to the Grays board. This could go up to £50 million now if there's an exceptional bid from the Grays town board. There's £11 million government funding on the underpass already, and then only last week the Prime Minister announced another £2 million to around the shopping centre. That goes towards as well Thurrock Council's commitment of upwards of £40 million already committed to the Grays area. All these funding will give some confidence to a circular £150 million extra from the private sector into the Grays, making a total of over £200 million to be spent in Grays Town Centre by 2025. Right, so I hope that gives some idea of what the commitment is to the Conservative commitment to a Grays Town Centre. And tonight I hope that we can recommend the recommended option, which is the Plaza option, which would be a fantastic asset to the Grays tonight from my colleagues. And this is the commitment that shows with last month's Grays Civic Sound Centre project coming with a wider regeneration is safe and going to be delivered by a Conservative administration.
Thank you, Councillor Coxall. Members, have we got any questions or comments in relation to this report? None? Okay. I'll lead on then. I've actually lost count of how many versions of what we would be doing in Grays over a number of administrations to improve it. Indeed, I remember one of the first questions I ever heard as a member of the public was from a previous Conservative leader saying how run-down Grays was, and getting quite a flippant answer on how wonderful Grays was from the Labour elected member at the time. Oddly enough, maybe 4 or 5 years later, that same question was asked by the same Labour member of one of us when we were in administration of what we're going to do to Grays because it's looking quite, dated. Which I thought was some kind of irony that nothing can move forward in that period of time. We now move forward roughly the same period of time since we've taken administration, and we've got in front of us 3 very good options, which are completely different to the original options put forward. I personally do favour the option C, the Plaza. I think it's out of all of them is great, and Councillor Coxall really sort of hit it well on the head right at the beginning, saying this is not the original plan. This is, we've now expanded it. So no doubt we will see headlines of, yet another cost overrun in relation to building works under this council. But number one, the building works haven't started. We're only just agreeing what we're actually going to do. We've had plenty of time to actually improve this. We've got now 150 million, it is, from New River to improve the other side of the tracks going that part of the high street of the town centre. We've got government giving us anything up to 75 million to help improve Grays town centre, which is a huge amount of money. Plus the 11 million that we've had already, plus what we've already putting in. This is really a commitment, and I'm glad that this is here tonight, so we can move it forward at last. What I really want to get across is obviously to build this. There are still premises there that needs to be purchased and torn down to be to facilitate the option. Can I have the assurance that we're doing absolutely everything in relation to that, Councillor Coxall, to move that forward? We did really well. Move that forward without having to go through the compulsory purchase order process, which, as we know, takes forever. We worked well with the original. With the owners of the shops next door to help play our part with the new offices here. So we will be doing the same as soon as we possibly can with the shops on the corner by the station.
With the Plaza option, it's slightly moving, and it's different to the the drawings we got given when we took over administration, it's very different again. It's a slightly different alignment. That doesn't mean to say we won't. They're mainly because of what happened with New River and how we sort of try and make sure we are working in line with the private sector on New River's plans coming forward. And New River have made some great help with the council here and the officers working together for the grades regeneration, which then works together in harmony to make sure a better design that works to see their private sector drawings coming forward and their plans over the years. So it will change slightly the purchase of what buildings we do need to purchase with this option. We can go into previously. We don't want it. I don't want to see the threats that we've seen to landowners in Purfleet. We're not going to have that in Grays Town Centre. I think we're going to work in harmony with them. We want to deliver to get them, the shop owners, and their being into new buildings, into new shops, and make sure that Grays is part of that. And these traditional shops that are doing now, they're going to stay there. I had a conversation last week with All Cure about their keen commitment to be near doctor surgeries in Grays. I think we're going to have more of that, and making sure we can deliver a Grays community that's someone we'd be proud to live in, and the new homes and around the centre, around the middle of Grays to live and work there.
Thank you. It really is good to hear working in partnership. I mean, it's one of the things we've been doing exceptionally well. I think we need to be working better with all of our partners to move forward. So it's really good to hear. Councillor Maney, you wish to ask a question?
Thank you, Leader. It's more of a comment, really. I think the first observation is that this is really an important report that we're considering tonight. It's the first step, really, on the road to generating Grays. And it's disappointing that with 6 Labour councillors for the Grays area, there's not a question here tonight from any of them. But like you, I'm a wider Grays area councillor, and I think you'll agree that, certainly the 20 years nearly that I've been a councillor, if there is one issue that comes up on the doorstep year in, year out, and never abates, it is the state of Grays. You can try and talk up Grays, but the reality is it's run down, it's not very welcoming, and something needs to happen. So obviously I welcome this as a cabinet member, but as a councillor for the Grays area, I know this is what our residents expect to see, and I'm delighted that we are finally doing something about it with government, a lot of government support at what is really still a difficult time. But it's good to see that we've got the town's interests at heart. As I say, I am disappointed that not one of the 6 Labour councillors could be bothered to ask a question on what is a fundamental investment in their town. But thankfully, we've got the town's interests at heart.
Thank you. Councillor Fox, should I come back forward on that one?
Yeah, I come back. It is disappointing. Like the Grays Town Board are a really critical, important, and a plea to the Labour councillor on the Grays Town Board to get involved, really, and make sure he can turn down, because that is going to deliver up to £50 million, and it's going to be delivered, because what I hear on doorsteps, not just how bad it is, but we heard this before. We've got to think, and that's what I'm saying, this money from the central government has got to be spent by the end of 2020, by 2026, 2025, in 5 years. We've got to draw plans up, get them in this year, by December, for approval to start producing drawings and start building in 2 years' time. And that money's got to be spent. We've heard the Prime Minister build this government. This money has got to be spent in 5 years. We can't mess around with that. They promised it. We've got to line up to that. And I beg the 3 councillors in them to get involved, decide what they want to spend it. They're the ward councillors. I normally would deal with ward councillors directly. This is a huge amount. There's nothing like that coming in one ward outside Purfleet than anywhere else, Grays. Now is the time. We've got the next few months to make sure that what do they want, how do they want Grays to look. We're setting the draft now. It won't be changed after January, the end of this year, and we're off.
That's excellent. I was just going to actually echo the Councillor Maney's response. I really have lost count of the amount of times I've had to say to my residents, there's plans coming. Actually, we've changed the plans a little bit, but something's going to happen. And well, here's written proof that is truly happening. And we've got a time frame in which to deal with this, as Council made it clear. And it is the time for action. And that action can't be unfortunately the normal what we tend to expect. No, we don't want change. It needs to go back to how it was in 1976 or whenever. we've moved on an awful lot since then. You know, I can remember shops in Grays that are now no longer there, as in the premises are no longer there, and they've been knocked down and replaced with something so much better, and they've been relocated. We've got fantastic plans along with New River in what they want to deliver in the Grays Town Centre, and it will be completely different. It will be the new town centre in the new norm. So the quicker we can crack on and actually start showing residents this is what's going to happen and this is when it's going to happen, I think the better. So with that, unless there's any other comments, I'm going to move to page 32. And the Cabinet are asked to approve option C as a selected concept to be designed in more detail through the current development service agreement contract with Network Rail. And I hope we're all in agreement with that. We are. Excellent. Really, really good news, not just for the residents of Grays, but the residents for areas surrounding Grays and indeed for the whole borough. So I'm going to move on to item 13, multifunctional device contract conversion. That's a report of Councillor Hoolin. Councillor Hoolin.
Thank you, Leader. Our current contract for multifunctional devices, or printers to you and me, Mark, runs out in March next year, and we have the option to extend the current contract for a year or procure a new one. Our current printers are 4 to 5 years old, and as we all know how fast information technology moves, it'll be no surprise that we as our council are out of date and unable to move digital and green agendas forward with our current models. Printers are no longer just printers. In fact, I find it quite scary just how intelligent they are these days. And even my basic printer at home can order its own ink supplies when it gets hungry. So on the face of it, we could go for the cheaper option by extending the existing contract, leaving us with end-of-life equipment and no improvement to services and save a little money. But actually the knock-on effect right across council services and how it holds them back could be very detrimental to residents. Next year sees the end of the library services contract and also the contract for the council tax billing systems done externally and without any flexibility, as we saw during COVID when we wanted to stop business tax bills from being generated. We couldn't and had to do mail runs and reruns whilst trying to reassure people about rates, etc., and deal with the emergency at hand. If we continue with the 1-year extension, we will also have to procure a new costly system for billings and libraries, and we'll be left as we are now with systems that are not compatible, can't talk to each other and don't work well together, kind of like an ex-marriage really. But rather than getting a divorce, we should seize the opportunity to amalgamate all 3 contracts and be in possession of harmonious systems. I make light of it a bit, but actually it's imperative we have an up-to-date and usable tax billing system. And by procuring a new MFD contract, we can bring this in-house, reducing costs and giving us much-needed flexibility on changes as and when required. With the procurement of new printing devices comes intelligent barcoding, job ticketing and automatic redirection of large documents to more economical ways of printing. More importantly, we get mail merging systems for outgoing mail, so we reduce the amount of post and cost of sending it, and network linked paper folding and enveloping, all controlled by paper cut software for fully automated rather than some manual processes of data protection. So GDPR audit trails from outgoing mail printing, mail merging through to letter printing, folding and enveloping, all automated. For residents, this means at last they will be no longer have to make the journey to civic offices to submit documents with fully traceable database protection. They only need to go to their local library or hub where they'll be able to scan and send them electronically, knowing it's been securely sent. And caseworkers no longer need to travel back to civic offices for their paperwork. The procurement of a new contract sees devices that would be the foundation and underpinning of our agile working and green agendas. They're the start of reducing our carbon footprint. They're the start of RPA, robotic process automation, the transition and use of artificial intelligence that can immediately direct letters and emails to the correct service areas 24/7 and not just 9 till 5. When you start to look at the figures, the old contract was around 196,000 a year, and the new contract with all the added advantages comes in at about 231,500, an increase of 35,000 a year. But what we mustn't forget is the new contract also includes the tax billing systems and the library contracts, which at the moment cost around 41,500 a year and are likely to go up on renewal. So actually the new contract's cheaper, and there are many cost savings in other service areas that are not in the IT budget, such as reduced ink costs, travel expenses, postage, envelopes, paper. And so all in all, officers are confident they can achieve all these improvements within existing budgets. However, the cost of printing per page is higher, and when our council is printing in the region of 9 million pages of paper a year, we must be very mindful of this increase. And whilst reduced costs in other areas help, it's imperative we seriously do everything in our power to reduce this to ensure we come in on budget. And which is why there will be a full and thorough review of paper usage and reassessment of printing and quantities printed. This report says officers will look to reduce paper usage by 10% over 2 years, but you only have to look at reports to know we're only printing on about 54% of the page. Look at the ones in front of you for that. And that needs to go up so the number of pages comes down. And how many of these reports get printed, put on the side, not used, and then go straight to the shredder? 10% is not enough. I want to see a much tougher target. So whilst I'm 100% behind procurement of a new MFD contract and would ask Cabinet to support recommendations 1.1 and 1.2, I want the paper reduction target changing to at least 30%.
Thank you, Councillor Hogan. Members, do you have any questions about the procurement report? Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Leader. Definitely, this is the way forward, because obviously technology can help in a range of issues, and not just IT. It helps every department. I am slightly concerned with obviously a cost increase, cost per copy. Obviously, any new tendering would be good to try and bring costs down, but obviously, cost versus benefit is always a mixture. However, I definitely support getting a new contract with all the added benefits, especially with the likes of paper cut, scanning, all them types of benefits that will help every service across, and obviously the greater council services as well. So it's definitely good, but just that cost per copy, I think if this is a rough model, is this a for definite model, or is this just one that we've looked at? Sorry.
This is the one we're looking at. It's like a conversion contract, but the procurement process will be done according with like legal requirements of council procurement. So I'm sure they'll be looking across the board. Can I just say that all those concerns you have, I raised at length with the officers that wrote the report, and we had quite a lengthy discussion around the figures, and they have constantly reassured me that the savings across services brings this in on budget with combined contracts and savings. They won't be needing any more money and won't be tied if they do, really.
Thank you both. Nobody else? I don't think we've probably won over every single person that's watching this online in relation to this report. You know, we do quite often get reports that may not seem to be setting the world on fire, but this is important. Having been an council officer for a number of years, working in departments to send out bills to every single household, and to, in our case, 1/10 of the households across the borough 4 times a year, having control of that and being able to not have to queue it up with everybody else, and if it goes wrong, we can fix something. Or as we saw this year, a terrible situation outside of our control, where we then have to send out another letter and another letter and another letter. Suddenly, we end up saving that just on the confusion factor. And there is nothing worse than residents getting one bill after another, whether it be businesses or otherwise, then it starts asking the question, what do I have to pay? When do I have to pay it? This is why I've not paid, because I've been told over this, told over that. So this is really quite welcome. I also welcome your push for much higher targets of reduction of paper. He's just looking at the number of sheets of paper he has in front of him. But again, it's not just the output, it's also the input. Having residents be able to safely scan documents in various sites across the borough will mean, again, a much better deal for our residents. And as we go into the new norm, we don't know what we will require as we go forward. So I think this is a really good idea. It's the right thing to look at. And it really is a case of as we move on as a council and decide how we interact with our residents in the new norm, I think this will be a way that we can easily adapt to do so. So with that, on page 101, two recommendations. Cabinet recommend to grant ICT authority to procure new MFD contracts, and Cabinet are recommended to grant delegated authority to Director of Finance, Governance and Property to award said contracts in consultation with the relevant portfolio holder. Are we all agreed? Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Hui, for your report. I'll now move on to item 14, which is on page 111, and that's the financial out-turn report for 1920. Councillor Hebb.
Thank you, Leader. This is frankly going to be the last rearview mirror look at financial outturn where COVID doesn't dominate the feature. All future reports will now reflect a post-COVID world. This is a rearview mirror look of the 2019 to 1920. The 2019 to 20 financial year, not going back 100 years. In summary, last year, before COVID, or up to after the first month of COVID, this council still delivered its budget surplus objective of 5.8 million. That has helped enable this authority to withstand the COVID pressures in the waning month of the last financial year. And it helps us to withstand emerging pressures, supported by over £10 million provided by Her Majesty's Government, of which 4.3 million was allocated in the report as articulated here in terms of the outturn report. Our reforms, our commercial approach has garnered substantial financial insulation for COVID, and our reserves are up by 131%. This report articulates much of that, but I shall use this report in particular to do that rearview mirror look and reflect on departmental performance and pressures over the last year. So key pressures that were identified through the year, and my colleagues across the table will be very versed in this, that children's social care and homelessness were in particular pressures as emerging through the year. Obviously mitigation has been achieved throughout the year, and we'll go through that as we go through the relevant departments. So if I turn to page 115, looking at the Adults, Housing and Health Department, the service has balanced with in-year mitigation. That is quite exceptional. I think we have to recognise that adult social care is a service which, if you've had to touch it or not, you know is under extraordinary pressure, even without talking about COVID. The fact that the department has managed to mitigate some of the more significant pressures, i.e. the residential placements in terms of learning disabilities and so forth, just is a testament to the team, their execution of what they do, the care that they do, and the way that they've operated. There are significant pressures emerging into next year. I'm not going to keep going on to next year. I think I've done that in my annual report and a month ago at this forum. Them pressures absolutely remain, and myself and Councillor Howden are frequently engaging in terms of how we can support the market as we go on. But for an adult social care department to balance with in-year mitigation is quite extraordinary and exceptional. So congratulations to the department for providing the right care, good quality care and good financial control. The Housing Revenue Fund is articulated in section 3.2. This covers the piece around homelessness. Effectively, there were an increasing number of households presented as homelessness through the year. You'll remember, colleagues, that we had a conversation. We supported an injection of one-off cash in terms of homelessness spend through the surplus. That piece of work has enabled us to deliver what is required out of the Homelessness Reduction Act, not to be confused with the HRA itself, and ultimately enable review of staffing structures and so forth to help us deliver that into sustainable manners in the longer term. Again, Children's Services 3.3, again, balanced with in-year mitigation. We did apply mitigation. Last year saw the Council's Children's Social Care Department go through its Ofsted inspection. And we did invest some one-off cash into that as well through our surplus, which we've got for the well-documented, well-known policy around commercial opportunities and investments and good financial management. That injection has enabled this authority to not only achieve the good rating, but ultimately it's also enabled us to continue to reform the service to make that a sustainable outcome in our pursuit of achieving an outstanding rating at any forthcoming forthcoming inspection. The work continues in terms of in-house foster care arrangements. Again, Captain Snowden and myself have had conversations with colleagues in the authority in terms of how we further advance that objective. I think it's probably the best way to say that. There is work happening as we speak, exciting work which aims to increase the incentive around in-house fostering, the benefits being primarily for the children in that arrangement, rather than going through independent fostering agencies, which has a high cost by nature of what they do, but also an element of fluidity, which probably isn't welcome for anyone in a foster care situation. So that work is ongoing. Again, the department has experienced some degree of issue in terms of having the right skills and competence. That is a conversation that, again, we need to continue to have, but advance further in terms of how we attract, retain the competence and skills and excellence in the market that we need. And we are continuing to do that. And Finance and the Social Care Department are talking more than ever, actually, about that accordingly. Section 3.4, I normally use this section to beat my colleague Councillor Watkins over the head a little bit in terms of overspend. The Environment and Highways Department, so Councillor Maney and Councillor Watkins, has delivered within budget. Following on from your statement, Leader, in terms of the Keep Britain Tidy score, that is an exceptional outcome. Like you say, we can all recount times where I had an email a couple of weeks ago, I think I forwarded it to the Chief Executive, Councillor Glade Hill, Aaron and Julie Rogers, about a resident who can be sceptical of the authority, but gone out of his way to write 3 paragraphs about the approach of one of our employees and the condition of the work that he has done over in Stamford and Hope. What a testament. Do you know what? Days like that make the job worthwhile, don't they? So, again, well done for delivering within budget, but furthermore, well done for improving the street scene and the green scene across the borough. Councillor Watkins has already noted around the waste contract stuff. We know that they are very fluctuation. There's lots of fluctuation, rather, I'll get my English right, in terms of the rates that we have to pay. That is variable, and it's right that further consideration is given to that in the future. Other departments, so just flicking into the finance, assets and governance and property section, there were some condition surveys which effectively meant to make sure that we had the outcomes which needed to be reconciled. That piece of work is articulated on page 118. And that the facilities management contract with an external supplier also incurred a number of variations above the budgeted levels. And the report articulates a plan in terms of what that might look like in terms of 2021, in terms of bringing the service back under local authority management. Colleagues in HR continued to deliver under budget, so congratulations to the team there. In terms of place, there is a piece of work in terms of our spend on developing the local plan in terms of consultants and so forth, went contra to overall development income, did cause some degree of an adverse pressure. Councillor Cottrell and I are engaged in terms of how we continue to develop and promote the local plan. Next parts of the policy to get resident engagement and business engagement. That piece of work is being informed and we'll be able to update it in due course. Notable under the place section on page 119 is that the annual production at the pantomime at Thameside actually received lower ticket sales last year, which is saddening. One, I thought it was one of its best productions ever, actually. I really enjoyed that. But most importantly, they've done an amazing amount of work to balance and deliver a theatre service which wasn't being propped up by the taxpayer. They didn't have such a great year last year, and we're obviously going to have to reflect on that as we move forward. In terms of the dedicated schools grant, we know the high needs block issue is not just one for the borough. We know it's one for the country. The report on page 119 articulates some of those pressures, and we have improved from last year in terms of the spend. But those discussions continue, and I know Councillor Jeffries is leading on that, and he's got our frank support with that. Housing revenue account has been maintained. There has been pressures in terms of sort of estates and assets management, but ultimately has achieved, as articulated in the report. If I advance and start to close on the capital programme, the authority has spent £101 million over the last year in terms of a number of projects. For example, some of those projects are around the A13 infrastructure initiatives. We know that there's some reconciliation that's had to be done in terms of the drainage and civils. There is a key focus to make sure that the unforeseen activity before the project was instigated can be met in terms of funding. At Celeb, Councillor Cockshaw, Councillor Biddle often really frequent. I myself went a few weeks ago. The authority managed to attract nearly £9 million of funding, and we continue to engage that type of approach to ensure that agencies will hopefully be able to listen to our calls, agree our reasoning for the support in terms of grants and so forth. There's other projects that have been done. Stamford Hope Interchange, for the rest of the world, Stamford Hope train station. The Pause and Reflect has done nothing but good for that initiative. By pausing and reflecting, we've been able to achieve a scheme which is far better, lower cost, and delivers wider objectives in the area of reducing car parking. So this variety of stuff going on. I think that's probably largely all, Leader, to summarise the year in terms of the outturn. I've already said and I've articulated that a month ago and at my annual report, I've articulated the pressures that tonight is not that night, and I'm not going to add any further statements to that. We've already got that objective underhand. And I think just one last closing point. It's easy to forget that actually we had 10 months before COVID last year in terms of a council year. An extraordinary amount was achieved, despite the fact that COVID come in the last month of the council year. And I think our reaction to COVID has been very good. I think the support that we've given small businesses, I think the government support, the care market, I think our reaction have been the right reactions and the proportionate reactions. But equally, I don't want it to overshadow the exemplary work done in the previous 10 months across the entire authority. And I'd like to put forward my recognition to colleagues and members of staff across the authority for the work that they have done to deliver an outturn which enables us to have more insulation for the trying times ahead than a number of other authorities. Thank you, Leader. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Hebb. Do any members have any questions? Councillor Howland?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor, for an excellent report. Just one comment that I picked up in 3 different overview and scrutinies now. Members just slightly questioning where we stand going forward in regards to reserves, and certainly in terms of social care, we are nowhere near the bottom of the rabbit hole. We know that the market is still in extreme flux. We don't know what final position the market is going to arrive at or how people are going to evolve to access care. So we are without a doubt looking at ongoing permanent revenue pressures that we are going to have to address. So I think that members need to recognise that reserves are a fantastic mechanism, but reserves are just that. They are one-off hits that we can call upon. So in terms of the year ahead, I think my invite to the opposition would be, please work constructively with us, because financially we are going to have an extremely difficult time, and we will require their honest scrutiny, but we are also going to require their support, because if they're under the impression that there are easy options, there are nice things we can do. There are spend-save initiatives, Head Start housing. There is work we can do to better incentivise the foster care market, but those options are few and far between. So there will be a difficult year ahead, and I hope that the opposition do respond accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Howland. Any other members? Any other questions? No, as Councillor Hebb said, it's the last of last year's reports. It's the way it always works. We've got recommendations on page 112. Obviously, I'm privy to a number of leaders' private messaging and chats that we have, and certainly I'm sure when we're sitting here in a year's time, this report will be a little bit more difficult because that reflects the majority of the time during the COVID crisis, and that will be mirrored up and down the country. But I think we will, because we were strong going in. I think we've actually got ourselves in the right place, for this terrible, unforeseen pandemic. But that doesn't mean to say there are significant challenges ahead. But with this part of this report, there are 3 recommendations on page 112, and that's to note the general fund net expenditure has been met within overall budget envelope, and the general fund balance has been maintained at 11 million. Note that the balance on the housing revenue account reserve has been maintained at 2.175 million, and note that there is a total of £101.398 million in capital expenditure, and some of the key projects have been set out as in section 5. So are we all in agreement with those? Agreed? Next up, we come on to the last item on the agenda this evening, and that is a report from the Association of South Essex Local Authorities, known as ASLA. I need to make clear I'm delivering this in my role as the leader of the council, although I do also happen to be the chair of said ASLA. Just over 2 years ago, nearly 3 years ago, the council leaders from Brentwood, Thurrock, Basildon, Castle Point, South End and Rochford, along with representatives from Essex, formed together to see how we could work better together to deliver better services for our residents, but mainly to see how we could improve the infrastructure deficit that's been present across South Essex for decades. It was actually quite nice actually sitting in a meeting where other leaders are saying, well, we had no support from central government or from Essex County Council for a significant number of years. I'm sitting there being sort of quite chuffed myself that I've got an MP in the form of Jackie Doyle-Price MP and indeed Stephen Metcalfe MP, who have lobbied quite successfully for a significant amount of cash for infrastructure such as Junction 30, 31 on the M25, and obviously subsequently to that, lobbying for money in relation to these facing slips, along with the submissions obviously that come from here. But whilst it's nice to think, oh, actually we don't do too bad in Thurrock, there is still so much more that needs to be done across the whole of the south of Essex to improve infrastructure and support for the residents that are here now, and indeed the residents that will come in the future. So we came together, and we've entered into a memorandum of understanding that made quite clear our intentions and what we will and won't do. That's one of the appendices in the report. And one of the key things that was very, very clear from the start, and not one elected leader said otherwise, is that we would maintain our own sovereignty wherever we went through this process. So we would maintain our own planning, maintain our own finances, and our own decision making. We couldn't gang up on another area, for want of a better term, or indeed be ganged up upon. So if there's one person vetoed it, it was a veto. But as we've moved forward, we've worked together. So if you remember back the last cabinet, I think, reported that we'd successfully getting £4.5 million of investment from government to improve the local full fibre network. I'm pleased to say I think we've got another injection of money in relation to that as well. We created quite a powerful economic plan for the region. We've been working collaboratively with Homes England on our infrastructure requirements to support housing that's here and housing that will come, and basically to make sure that these houses are affordable. And identifying strategic priorities that all South Essex authorities wanted to work together on. So we've now, over a significant number of meetings, come together, and you'll see in here that we've got a proposition that we intend to submit to government at the end of this month. And through the work, it's really become clear that South Essex has got the huge potential to increase its prosperity for all its residents that are here, not just those that live here, but all those that invest here and have got businesses here too. But it needs a bold and ambitious plan to make sure that happens. It needs to be underpinned with long-term investment, and we need to have powers transferred from Whitehall, so decisions that affect South Essex are being taken in South Essex. but it also works as a functioning economic area, which it clearly does, and offers a scale to attract investors both from government and from the private sector. And it also offers things on scale that can be done. So, for instance, our response to COVID-19 may well have been different across the whole of the authorities, but if we'd had the one group that's together, it could have been managed as well as we did here. It's also there to try and improve the average weekly wage in the area by increased economic output and increased levels of skills entertainment. So this is not just focusing on one area, it's actually looking at the whole offer for our residents now and in the future. One of the things is clear, if we look at the A13, it's a prime example, patches here and there expanded, patches here and there still 2 lanes. So we need to have that confidence as working as one to be able to deliver the Pan-South Essex infrastructure improvements that are including those that don't actually touch all of us. So everything with the A127 doesn't actually come into Thurrock, but improvement on the A127 would help Thurrock. So it's about putting the needs of all of us together to be able to deliver. And the plan puts our people, I say our people, our residents at the heart of all of it. Trying to create better jobs, trying to attract new businesses to the area. We can start working on programs to help improve our attainment in our young, and indeed change the skill set for those that are decided either through choice or through businesses going bust during the COVID period to be able to retrain and learn different skills. And also be working in partnership with government, just to make sure that we are delivering national projects as well, things like 5D digital network across the country, playing our part within that. It's part of the growth and prospectus. Growth and recovery prospectus. It is in here. We've been asked by government not to make clear any one particular model of delivery that we go for, or indeed what our full ask is. But I think for everyone who's read the prospectus, is really quite exciting. It outlines what we want to achieve and what we want to do. So if we want to put some figures on to this, is create 100,000 jobs across the whole of South Essex region by 2050, help 50,000 businesses to grow and increase productivity, to achieve benefits to the exchequer, so back to government, of £500 million per annum from reduced unemployment and increased productivity and business rates, to ensure businesses and residents recover from COVID and the estimated 12,000 jobs that are at risk currently are replaced by 2022. So that if you go to page 131, the list goes on and on and on, and that includes unlocking potential £5 billion worth of private investment in the area, and to help unlock parcels of land to help deliver the 96,000 homes again across the area, but at the same time doing so staying within our strategic housing needs assessment numbers. So making very clear in simple terms, we will not be taking other people's housing needs. It will be dealt with in whatever we could get from the prospectus in the numbers that were given to us by government before. There's also an aim to become a carbon zero region by 2040, the same as obviously we're looking for a government, and pretty much making more opportunities, 5,000 opportunities for our young people aged 16 to 24, either through apprenticeships or through schemes to get them straight into work. When it comes to the difficult part of governance, and I need to be really clear, we've seen, oddly enough, actually, looking at all the reports across the whole of the South Essex region, the press have reported it in different ways, in different places, which is interesting. And indeed, I'm not going to say who, but members that have come to me and said, are we looking for and then picking out one of the governance structures that's a possibility. And I've had to make it really clear, we're not at that stage. we're at the stage where we will be presenting the full report to government and asking what the ask will be. What do government expect in return for us to be able to get the money to start delivering these very, very ambitious plans? And they are ambitious plans, but without ambitious plans, we will not move forward as South Essex. So there isn't one particular model that we are asking for. There is not one particular set of sovereignty that we'll be giving up. As I said right at the beginning, planning decisions and everything else will still be made locally. The intention is for us to keep all of our local sovereignty. We are looking solely for a body to be able to deliver the infrastructure that we need to bring back that infrastructure deficit from literally decades of underinvestment in the area, to also help us establish things like the Freeport, which has been an absolutely brilliant idea of this government. And I will thank Councillor Coxall for his patience with me, having to explain to me more than once exactly the benefits of not just thinking about a port, but about thinking about a whole area for this. So not just, Chiltern Port or DP World Port, or combined of those two ports, but actually a whole bigger area. So it's really good to be able to tap into much bigger ideas, not just for Thurrock, but actually for the whole of South Essex and how this could work. So that will be presented to both civil servants and ministers. There will be no doubt significant discussions between now and the autumn statement, when I understand that the Chancellor or the relevant Secretary of State will announce those that have put in successful bids for devolution deals or prospectuses such as ours, to look how we can better govern South Essex and put in and secure significant, and I do mean billions of pounds worth of investment, not only from government but from private investors right across the whole of the South Essex corridor. At some point, there will be given a list of an ask of what we will be expected to do. And if you look at the models of combined authorities and other areas that have done this type of work up and down the country, the powers that they've asked for and have been devolved are all different. I did a very quick search today just to see, for instance, combined authorities and local planning decisions. Very good to see. I think it was Rugby Council making very clear that the decisions about planning are made locally. Decisions about strategic planning, strategic matters are referred to the Mayor for comment. So there are so many different variations. I could be here all night explaining we could do this, we could do that, but I think the report here makes it really clear what we are asking for as a group across South Essex. As soon as we know what that is, there will then be obviously another seller meeting to decide, is this the right model for us, and then to return to councils later in the year to move this forward, depending on what happens from the devolution white paper, which we're expecting in September. I'm sure Councillor Cox will correct me if I'm wrong. It is September, isn't it? Oh, okay. So that's pretty much where we are. You'll know, and I'll be very, very clear on the reasons why. We've got the Cabinet is asked to note recommendations 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3. The reason is to make clear what we're doing. This is not to say, this is a done deal and we're giving up this, or we're asking that, or this is going to happen, or anything else. This is just so everybody knows right across the whole of South Essex, as I understand that a number of my leader colleagues in Brentford and Southend, I think, and Castle Point this evening are having a similar discussion, with Basildon having their discussion tomorrow in relation to this. And again, I will repeat, because I'm sure this will be out in the news very quickly, that this is not making a decision as to any model of governance. This is not us making a decision on giving up planning rights or infrastructure rights or transport and highways matters or anything. This is about a proposition to government of what we feel we can offer collectively in South Essex, what government's ask would be on how that would be delivered, and then we will come back to discuss that in full at the relevant committee later in the year. As you say, I do not like, as we know, to note reports, but it is very important, I think, when we're taking such a leap forward with this, that it be brought here this evening. So, any questions in relation to this? Councillor Cockshaw, first of all.
I'm going to sell it a bit positive. what this is really, and it's an early stages of it, and it's been for many years, and I think we've got to look at. I sit on a few outside bodies, and one especially I sat on this afternoon, which is Transport East. Transport East is from the Thames to the Wash. Now, I do want to help my colleagues in Norfolk, but the problem is we've got to have a voice going to central government. Transport is out at the moment, is our voice. It's a central government, major infrastructure and connection projects. Now, that all well it's a big region. We moan about Select, which is from Sussex to right the way through to Essex. These are big bodies with voice of government to get funding decisions. We need someone with one voice in South Essex, and to say one, if not five authorities, not five chief executives. We need one. We need a body of something that's taken seriously in central government. There's a consultee that we can actually this is what we really need, and this is what it's about. It's not about taking powers away. It's about actually getting a voice. And that we've got that already, but on a massive sub-regional level. I want them powers to be South Essex. Now, if there's not a reason for South Essex to have something, a voice of South Essex, I don't know where it is. We've got complementary authorities that are all different, from a logistics hub in Thurrock to an entertainment place and a medical place in Southend. And in the middle of that, we've got a highly skilled engineering in Basildon. And we've got some great opportunities here. They're very, very, vaguely all different authorities that can be complementary, so they can't compete with each other. But will look fantastic, and central government will take this seriously instead of small authorities. On a minor scale, just in Thurrock, if you just look at the scale of the issues, look at the problems we've had at A13 at the moment. The A13 is used by everyone in South Essex, and the A13, but the risk is with this authority because it's a major national infrastructure item, but it's looked as a local authority road. And if you just look over the other side of the A127, many years, over and over again, you get authorities that's been neglected because it hasn't got a voice, the 127, to put to national government to get the money. Luckily, over the last few years, both administrations here have realised we need to improve the A13, and both administrations, we working with MPs, regardless of political thing, needed that work done and what they've done now. But if you go forward the next 10 years, East facing slips, that's another £70 million. Like, East Tilbury Link Road, that's going to be another £100 million if we need it. Right? We've got the Stanford Station now is £20-odd million that we got to find. We've got Ockenden Station need refurbishing. We've talked about Grays to Night Station. These are major infrastructures, let alone what's happening opposite us in Kent, with what's happening around Kent and about the London resort's going to come down to us. These are major infrastructure that small authorities need the help, and we need one voice to make sure that voice is being heard in central government, that we're the powerhouse. We need the help here. We need to be levelled up in certain areas, and we need an acting opportunity to give us that. And then you've got to think, if you look at other modal strands, how we haven't got a link to one of the best infrastructures, Crossrail from Brentford Central Station. We can't get that for our residents, can't get there. We need people to do that. How you can't link Tilbury Link Road to Tilbury to the Fenchurch Street line and then over to the London Liverpool, South End Liverpool Street line. Well, these are great costs. Will cost a lot of money, and we need a person or a group to sort of hit these hard to central government. And I love it or love it. I don't think Transport East can do that for us, and that's where we're at the moment. So this is not replacing us losing power. It's taking the powers that are already at a different level that residents don't know about, that we sit on as councillors. And all we're doing is trying to get that down to get a voice for South Essex to make sure that people in South Essex get what they deserve in this next few years and get the infrastructure built and ready so we can have a beautiful place to live in and work in.
Thank you, Councillor Cockshaw, and you're spot on. And it's not just that voice going up to Westminster. We've engaged with Opportunity South Essex, which are effectively business boards for South Essex. You probably see a bit of a theme coming here about South Essex, and they were extremely positive. They loved the idea of being able to go to it doesn't matter where and getting the same answer and being able to say, right, okay, we want to invest in South Essex. And there being no problem with, okay, it might happen in Thurrock, it might happen in Castle Point, it may have to straddle two areas, we might have to put new infrastructure in to be able to get people to get to and from work or to and from homes, and the businesses love the idea of being able to have that done centrally, and just basically to be asking once rather than to be asking one local authority and another local authority, then because there are two-tier local authority having to ask somebody else who actually absolutely doesn't appear to have any link directly with them. So it just cuts down that red tape approach. Some of the information I've had privy to and will be out there, the comments from residents that have taken part in some of the workshops and roadshows is that this is really good idea. Will we be delivering this, and this? And you sort of go through and you think this is great. We've not actually shared what we're looking at, but they're asking the questions that we are asking government that we've got the answers to, without seeing it. So we're all attuned with our residents, again, from Brentwood all the way to Rochford, which is absolutely fantastic. The other thing to note is with the exception of me, that there hasn't been any change of the leaders. Sorry, there have been changes in the leadership and indeed the political leadership of some of those local authorities. Again, right across the board, with the exception of Thurrock. So we are working cross-party, cross-boundary for 800 and something of 1,000 people that live in all of our areas that we represent, which is absolutely fantastic. And it's been positive pretty much all the way through. This, with everyone having that set mind goal of how can we improve what we do locally to improve our residents' lives, to improve their jobs, to improve their attainment, and not just for the next 10, 20, 30 years when I might be working, or all of us might be working, but for my deputy leader's daughter, and for other people's daughters and granddaughters, and so on. This is a lifetime changing thing, and quite frankly, it should be grabbed with both hands. But as Councillor Coxwell said, it's not about what we are losing, because there isn't really anything in that. It's about what we are gaining and what we could gain as an area, and that's the thing we all should be focused on. Quite clearly, it would help actually if when the press reports something or people start to complain about what we're doing, is actually they read the reports that are there, read them all, and do what actually one or two members have done. Actually, they sort of ask the leader, what does this mean? Does this mean this? Does it mean that? And be able to say no, it doesn't, or yes, it does, or give the answers that I can at the time. Any other questions or statements? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Leader. Overall, very positive report, which I really do welcome. But I haven't really got a question as such, more some words containing a little bit of fearful hindsight. I note that there are 5 options for exploration in your report on page 132, and I totally understand the need for them all. You said about what we should focus on. They need to be included to make sure this is a robust and transparent investigation into what is the best way forward for South Essex, ensuring we get meaningful voice for future investment and regeneration. However, I do fear the option of a local development corporation. There's the Labour Government Development Corporation that was here in Thurrock between 2004 and 2012. I think you all agree it was a complete disaster, with near riots in South Ockenden, the way the corporation rode roughshod over residents' feelings. And at a time here in Thurrock whereby we are very open and transparent with our council housing plans in particular, I am fearful this could be a regression. I'd just like my thoughts noted, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. And obviously it has to go in there. We have to outline, what the options are, solely because we're not at the stage where we're asking government for one of these 5 options, because we're not at that decision point as yet. But I really do share your concerns about option 3, the establishment of a local development corporation. I think only Councillor Maney and I have lived through pretty much all of it, really, and it was not the best. I'm being very diplomatic there. We see perfectly, with significant amount of new homes and flats and everything else put in, absolutely no more shops, no more schools, and no more infrastructure. It's actually taken us to move that forward ourselves, and obviously again with the help of Parliament, with Jackie, just before we say, to get the school in, and that's the way we've been doing it. So yeah, I do have the concerns about that. I'm not going to share what my personal feelings are on the best option, because that would be inappropriate. But I would say my least favourite option would be a local development corporation, because it takes away your planning ability and your ability to have the influence we have as locally elected members to it. I've lost count how many times I went to the DC in objection to pretty much the same application time and time again. Fortunately, we outlasted the DC, and it hasn't been built, and it won't be built, so thank heavens for that. Councillor Coxall wanted to come back.
Yeah, I just think I've tried to say all the positives in it. I think I quite agree with my colleagues here tonight. The Development Corporation isn't a good idea, but I warn that now that if government sees this and we don't move forward, we can't. South Essex is a powerhouse. South Essex is where it is. We need to level up the agenda, and we will get a development corporation if we don't do something. I think standing still and doing nothing for the last since 1974 is not the answer. Or 1998. I think we've got an opportunity, and like I said in my speech earlier about once in a lifetime, this is a once in two generation. This is a generation to change it and get authority that can be really good. And I'm excited about the options that are sitting there. Other than that one, I think we've seen it and did it. Our colleagues in the other authorities haven't seen a development corporation been through a development corporation. And when Eric Pickles was there, he was the first one to remove our one, and it was pleasing to see it go. And the powers back. And I don't think that's what legally you said, that we're not losing planning powers, that's staying here. This is powers that we can actually get a voice and think, but we do need that, and we will get a development corporation if we don't get our act together really as a South Essex agenda. Because developers and people want to see, before they invest in an area, they want to see the infrastructure, they can talk to someone, they know where we're going. And we're small authorities, and we need to get one voice. But before we get the development corporation, let's get to our own act for it. It'd be great to see something special.
Well, I was just going to go on to say, the development corporation here, as an option, has to be in here because it is one of those possibilities. But the concern of having a South Essex Development Corporation or an Essex Development Corporation should scare the living pants off every single elected member in every single constituency and every single council area across the south of Essex, and indeed across wider Essex. It's not as nice as people feel. As the thing, it is invariably undemocratic. It is run by businesses, and suddenly they will look at the easy options first, the low-hanging fruit. So any low-hanging fruit in any local authority will be the first place they will focus their attention on, irrespective of whether it brings any infrastructure, irrespective of whether it overburdens the local infrastructure as it is now. It will be the negative type of build, not the proper build that our government and our Prime Minister have been advocating to get this country back on its feet. Any other questions? Councillor Howden?
Just to comment on the prospect of what we can achieve. Some of the problems that we want to address have been problems for decades anyway. So the belief that just staying as we are will fix some of these problems is absolute fantasy. Clearly, we need to do something different, and I think this is a really positive first step. And certainly, as we go into what is going to be a severe recession that is going to affect the country for years and years to come, if we think about care leavers, if we think about learning disabled adults, we need to be creating the jobs, we need to be creating the skills. And frankly, for those people, they don't care if your designation is unitary or district or county. They want to see cooperation across the piece to actually tackle some of these problems, and for us to work together to create the infrastructure, to grow the skills, to grow the jobs that are actually going to positively impact their lives. So administrative wrangling, and you referenced the different approaches of reporting, leader. I think people just need to look at what this report does in essence, that if we do work together, the rewards for our constituents will be absolutely tremendous. And I guarantee you, if we deliver that type of growth for the benefit of our residents, they're really, really not going to be concerned about historic arguments about different anomalies of local government structure.
You're absolutely quite right. I mean, it's always an eye-opener when you go to a meeting as a leader and you hear other leaders speak and you think, wow, that's exactly the same problem we have in Thurrock, but a different town name, a different a different college that can't be accessed, or a different set of jobs that can't be accessed, or I've got a significant number of people that are working in this and they're driving through to yours, and this is a problem for them. They're spending 2 hours getting to what should take a 10-minute drive, and it's like, yeah, you're quite right. Well, we don't get to see that because we don't talk enough. We don't talk. We do now talk as a seller, which is absolutely great. But being able not just to talk, but actually have that one voice to be able to deliver the fixes to historic problems, to be able to get our children and those that are learning to be able to get to like Basildon or to Benfleet or wherever easily, so they can learn and improve their skills to be able to go into the job market. Where we've got people living in Thurrock driving to Basildon because that's where their employment is, to be able to get there and perhaps not have to drive. But not have to take an hour and 10-minute journey going all the way to Pitsea and coming all the way back to literally go 20 minutes up the road. It's ridiculous not to be able to access, as Councillor Coxwell pointed out, Crossrail at Brentwood, which actually isn't that far, but unless you've got a vehicle to get you there, you're taking forever to get there. It's the potential that's missed out upon for the rest of South Essex. It's the C2C, one of the most efficient train lines that we have in the country. They always ticking the right boxes. They don't always get it right. The train's not always on time, but they are a majority of the time, which is great. But again, it's split into two. Actually, split into technically three at one point. With one arm that you have to go to Pitsea to pick up, and it then next meets Upminster. You've got the little bit of loop in between, which is one of the busiest areas, which is the bit that goes through Thurrock, and then there's a little tiny bit that goes up to Lakeside and through to Ockenden, which is one of the Mark's very good at this one of the busiest single tracks in Europe for movements of trains. And there's a new station in the sense that we've got Lakeside there, but we've not got actually Chatham Under Station, but it's still going up and down the same line. And I went up and down as a kid, going into Tilbury Town to get the ferry, or Tilbury Riverside to get a ferry to go over to Gravesend on our day out. So everything does need to change, and without that big voice, we can't just have Thurrock going, "Can we please have this money?" We need the voice of 6 local authorities, 800,000 people now, up to 1 million in the next 20 years, being able to say one strong voice. We actually need to be able to do this to improve the ability for our residents to earn, to learn, and for the government to gain the tax money it needs to keep this great nation moving forward. Any other questions we've got in relation to this? No. It is, as I say, there's been a significant amount of discussions amongst the leaders, both present and past, in relation to this. I know that some areas are all in favour in the way that we are. Some are a little bit hesitant. Some feel that we're not far enough forward. Some think we're at a different stage. But it's very, very clear that obviously here in Thurrock, we know that the prospectus will be finalised. We'll be putting this forward to government to see what the ask will be, and indeed if our prospectus is what they are looking for a change in powers, and indeed to create that one voice. We've got, as I say, the backing opportunity South Essex, our envoy on the Thames Estuary Growth Board. So also had comment in that. And if you think Thames Estuary Growth Board is literally from the centre of London right the way out to the North Sea, both north and south of that. So a significant area, and surprisingly enough, we're one of the biggest growth areas in that big area. So my personal one is that this is definitely the right thing to do. So they are somewhat long. There was an even longer discussion to reduce the amount of words that we use. So it's to note the intention to immediately engage with central government ahead of the autumn spending review regarding the economic agenda for the South Essex region, how it can deliver new jobs, new transport, new infrastructure, new homes and the future governance arrangements to deliver a better outcome in its existing and new residents and businesses as set out in the Growth and Recovery Prospectus 2020 at Enclosure 2. To note the work commenced by Sailor to begin to consider and explore the most appropriate and effective future governance arrangements to realise South Essex' full economic and social potential and the shared ambitions that set out in the independent review of governance in South Essex at Enclosure 3. This report does not, and I repeat, does not seek to improve or endorse any of the specific governance proposals as outlined as earlier discussed. And 1.3, to note that a further report will be presented later in the calendar year to provide an update to the outcome of the discussions with central government and any proposals for the more formal interim governance arrangement for a seller to ensure transparency and accountability. So if someone would like to replay that for Councillor Johnson. So with that, are we all in agreement with those three quite long to note? Agreed? Excellent, thank you, because I've run out of air again. So thank you all in relation to this evening's Cabinet meeting, and I call it to an end at, I also thank Roger for joining us online, and I've just remembered, thank you very much, Councillor Head, for reminding me. I'm sure elected members will, be moved to hear that unfortunately the previous mayor and previous independent councillor Barry Palmer passed away. All of us that worked with Barry was absolutely fantastic gentleman, really was. When I first got involved in politics as an independent candidate in Tilbury, he came out, he showed me the ropes, showed me what to do, helped me sort of form what I should stand for as a councillor and how I should do it, and was an absolute stalwart of Thurrock. He really was an absolute, it really is a loss to not only the residents of East Tilbury, but also to Thurrock as a whole. He really will be missed, and he chaired planning for what seemed to be forever, and it was it actually was really quite good when he sort of sat on the hearings. He was really structured. He was really great with people that were speaking that were residents. It was literally everything he was absolutely fantastic. So obviously like Parsons condolences to all those within his family, and indeed all those people that knew him and knew him so well and for a lot longer than I did. I say an absolute wonderful gentleman. There's a great loss to Thurrock, and I apologise. It wasn't written down, but I didn't pick up all of my papers before I came in. So with that, I'm going to bring the meeting, unless anyone else wishes to say anything. I'm sure we will be making reference to this at the next full council, but we will bring the matter to the meeting to a close at 20:42. So thank you very much.